Hey, what is going on guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS4 and PS5 jailbreak news update. So it's been quite a while since I've done one of these videos because I was away on vacation in the United States for a few weeks. And yeah, had a really great time over there. Now that I'm back, I'm having high fructose corn syrup withdrawals. But besides that, I am pretty much all good to go. So obviously, a lot of the news you'll hear in this video is about a week old because I haven't been able to record. I did actually set up a remote system for being able to record videos while I was away using a Nintendo Switch, which was running Ubuntu, and I could send a wake-up packet through a VPN to my computer to turn my computer on remotely, and then I was able to remote desktop into it to record videos if I had to. But luckily there wasn't much to really cover throughout most of the time that I was away until the previous week, and by then it was getting kind of busy on holiday and I didn't really have much time to record any videos. So this video is mainly going to be covering stuff that's happened over the past week. So for people mainly who, I guess, haven't heard it from other sources yet. So the main piece of news that's happened over the past week is that TheFlow put out a spoiler alert saying don't update. This was on the 22nd of September. And then below that, he posted a reply where he said he just reported some cool bugs, so it might take a while until disclosure. So he did the same thing when way back in like 2019, when we had the 5.05 jailbreak for the PS4, and he basically said, hey, don't update past 6.72, and that was because he had the jailbreak for 6.72 that he had reported to Sony. However, it took quite a while before it was actually released. A lot of people were calling him out on it being fake, because it was many weeks before it was actually disclosed. And typically these reports take about 90 days minimum before they're disclosed after a hacker like TheFlow requests disclosure on the report. And also the report has not shown up yet in HackerOne's Hacktivity section, which means it's probably still open. Once it's been fixed and closed, we will then have it showing up here. And of course, if a bounty is awarded to TheFlow after it's been closed, then it should appear in the Hacktivity section once that happens. And then from there on, it could take about 90 days before it actually gets disclosed. It has been longer in the past. Sometimes we've had to wait upwards of 6 months to a year before disclosure, but hopefully it will not take that long this time. And at the moment, we have very little information. We don't know if this is for PS4 or for PS5. It could even be for both, because there have been bugs in the past that have affected both systems. So my bias is that it's probably going to be for PS5, because a week earlier than that, TheFlow did also put out a post showing that his Blu-ray drive exploit, the userland portion, the BDJ exploit, still works up to the latest firmware on the PS5. So I'm kind of guessing that he's probably combining that with some new kernel exploit that he's discovered to create a userland plus kernel exploit chain on the PS5 up to the latest firmware at the time. And yeah, so the good news is that now that we've got this kind of notification not to update, you should definitely avoid updating now. So currently there was some new firmwares that got released for the PS4 and PS5, 11.0 for the PS4, and we got 8.0 for the PS5. So I would definitely not update to those. If you're on a lower firmware, do not update to those. And if you're already on those firmwares, do not update to anything above that, because if the report's still open, then these firmwares could still be vulnerable to whatever TheFlow's discovered. So just don't update past 8.0 on the PS5 or 11.0 on the PS4, but preferably if you're on a lower firmware than those, then stay on that lower firmware. Do not even update past that. That's pretty much what we've got there. Obviously a new PS4 jailbreak would be good as well, because it's been almost 2 years since 9.00 was released, and it would be nice to have, an updated jailbreak for the PS4 so more people can enjoy the jailbreak for the PS4. And obviously the PS5, we've been stuck on 4.51, which is a very old firmware for the PS5 now. So a new exploit, even if it's a partial jailbreak for the PS5, which it probably will be, it will still be great to have that so that we can access newer games on the PS5. So yeah, there we go. That's what we've got so far from TheFlow. That's the big piece of news. Now, in addition to that, there's a few other things I want to go over here. So we also have some updates relating to the Revert method on the PS4, which was my last video before I left to go on vacation, which I did the whole tutorial showing you guys how to revert the PS4 from a higher firmware to a lower firmware and setting it up as a permanent hardware mod. And in that, I used a Teensy 2.0++ to read and write to the NOR chip and the Syscon chip, because you could use the same device to read to both chips. Now, the problem with that is that the Teensy 2.0++ is old. It's no longer being produced, It's been superseded by things like the Teensy 4.0 and 4.1, so those are obviously more readily available and they're cheaper. The problem is we've not been able to read and write to the NOR chip using the newer Teensies, even though the Syscon writer, the Syscon tools by Abcarino and CGYCNQ, those work on those newer Teensy models. They work on the 4.0 and 4.1. The reason why I didn't use those in my tutorial is because the SPI script for reading and writing to the NOR chip only works on 2.0++ because it's old and it hasn't been updated in a long time. So it doesn't support those newer Teensies, so that's why I had to use the 2.0++. So the good news now is that we have a few developers who are working on getting support for reading and writing to the NOR chip on those newer Teensy models. So Wildcard here put out a post saying, "About time this happened, releasing a tool similar to SPI, but one that supports Teensy 4.0 and will be using Python version 3, whereas the one for 2.0++, the original SPI script, only worked on, I think, 2.7-32. And he also says more chips to be supported in the future. So he's probably going to support Teensy 4.1, and I think there's Teensy 3 point something. So he may also support those with this as well. So this will be really useful. You'll be able to use those cheaper Teensies, which are more readily available. Plus the Teensy 4.0 has a 3.3 volt pad on it already. So you may not have to do the 3.3 volt mod like I had to do to the Teensy 2.0++ in order to get it to read and write to the NOR chip in circuit. That would also remove one of the steps that you have to do as well to make things a bit easier. And then we also have Andy Man, who's been working on newer versions of his PS4 Wii tools. Now, one of the things he's been doing is integrating a lot of the things that I used separate programs for, and he's combining them all into one application into his PS4 Wii tools. So he already added the UART functionality, so you can get the serial output from the console without having to use a separate program like Putty in order to do that, which is handy. But in the newer versions, 0.8.8, he's adding a SPI flasher. And what this will allow you to do is it will allow you to read and write to the Syscon using, again, a Teensy 2.0++ for now. But the good thing about it is it can allow you to just write the portion of code in the NOR chip to switch the slots over, instead of having to write the entire NOR flash, which takes about 10 to 11 minutes if you use the verify write command, which verifies each block as you're writing it to make sure you get a good write of your NOR chip. But that took about 10 to 11 minutes when I did it. But with this, you could just write the section of code that is going to switch the slots over instead of the entire NOR flash. And apparently, according to Andy Man, it takes about a second in order to write that. So much faster, much easier to try different slot patterns to see which one works with your console. So that's definitely going to simplify things. But then he's also posted down here that he's also working on a kind of setup with the Teensy 2.0++, which removes the need to use the voltage regulators that I used in my tutorial, where I used two voltage regulators, one to do the 3.3 volt mod to the Teensy, and then another one to reduce the voltage even further to 3 volts. You can reduce the voltage by using 2 resistors instead, which appears to be what he's doing here. Now, I'm not sure how well this will work because I did try using just the 3 volt voltage regulator to just supply a low enough voltage to the chip, to the NOR chip, to read and write, but I was still getting bad results, which is why I had to do the whole 3.3 volt mod to the Teensy, then reduce the voltage even further to the VCC point down to 3 volts in order to get a good read and write in circuit. So I'm not sure how well this will work. If this is just reducing the voltage on VCC, I'm not sure how well this will work. It also supplies like 5 volts to the CS point, I believe, which causes bad reads. You'll need to reduce the voltage on that line as well, potentially, at least from my tests, unless there's something I missed. But either way, if you can get this working, that'll be great, because you'll be able to use a couple of resistors instead of voltage regulators, which will be a little bit easier. So some good updates to the revert method to make it easier. I'll probably end up having to do another tutorial once enough updates come out to really simplify the process enough to make it worth doing another video on that. Okay, and another thing that's been doing the rounds recently is a new Homebrew app for the PS4 that is essentially a free store, a free game store that you can use to download full PS4 games, DLC, and updates directly to your PS4, instead of having to download the package file on the computer and install it with a package installer and find the right update to patch the game with. It basically does everything for you. It's essentially like Lightning Mod's Homebrew store, except it works for downloading PS4 games and DLC instead of Homebrew applications. Pretty similar to what the Nintendo Switch had with the Homebrew Games Shop with tinfoil. Very similar to that, you can just download full games, DLC and updates directly to the PS4. Obviously, since it's basically a piracy app, I'm not going to be able to provide any links in the video description to this, and I'm not going to do any tutorials or guides on how to set this up for obvious reasons. But I thought I would mention it here in this video since this is a news update and this is something that has come out. So moving on, we also have some updates to John Tormblom's BDJ SDK, his Blu-ray drive exploit for the PS5. So one of the things he's done is he's implemented a new version of the PS5 ELF loader. So he says here, this ELF loader for PS5 systems that has been jailbroken using BDJ PS5 payload loader or the WebKit from Spectre. And unlike ELF loaders bundled with those exploits, this one uses ptrace syscall to load itself into SCE party daemon process, hence will continue running in the background even when playing games. Furthermore, this ELF loader will also resume its execution on the PS5 when it returns from rest mode. Payloads that are loaded are executed with SCE Redis server process, so if the payload crashes, the ELF loader will keep on running. So what he's essentially saying here is it's basically mimicking the same functionality that the libhijacker has. It's basically an ELF loader that uses the same process as the spawner ELF from the libhijacker, where it hijacks the Redis server and uses that to spawn a daemon process that runs the loader. So that means you can, any payload you load with it can run outside of the disk player app if you're using BDJ, or outside of the WebKit when you're running the WebKit version of the exploit. So if you load this version of the ELF loader, any payload that you run with it can continue running in the background when you're on the home menu, or when you're running a game, or when you recover from rest mode, it'll still be running. So that is pretty handy there. He's got his own version of that. And then on top of that, he's done a few other updates. He's also added a kernel log server, so it'll redirect the kernel log to sockets connected on port 3232. Which is pretty handy if you want to get the kernel log from the console. You can run that payload. Because it's running in the background as well, it's more useful now because it will run all the time after it's been loaded using that new ELF loader, which is pretty handy. And then on top of that, he also updated his FTP server payload as well to also run in the background. So for example, here you can see it keeps running in the background after coming back from rest mode. So a few updates there from the BDJ SDK from John Tormblom. Now another thing to touch on real quick is supposedly there was a ransomware attack against Sony's systems, and the hackers supposedly managed to get all of Sony's data, or at least that's what they were claiming. However, this doesn't appear to be exactly credible, mainly because the proof of hack that they posted was described as not particularly compelling by the site that it was posted on, and also the file tree for the hack looks small given the fact that they claimed that they managed to get all of Sony's data when the file tree is quite small. So it looks like they maybe didn't get as much as they were claiming. And we haven't really seen any proof of any kind of PlayStation stuff that has been gathered from this hack so far. So we'll have to wait and see. They said that the September 28th, the time that I'm actually recording this video, was when they're going to release the data. So I guess we'll have to wait and see if we get anything from this. Those are all of the main things I wanted to cover here in this video. Now that I'm back, obviously I'll be posting more regularly, providing there's stuff to actually post about and talk about, which hopefully there will be. Things were kind of dead over the past few weeks, to be honest, which was good for me being away. And apart from this, stuff with TheFlow and a few updates here that I've covered in this video from the past week. But besides that, there's not really been a hell of a lot recently. So hopefully things start to pick up a bit more and I'll be posting more now that I'm back. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.